Hello, you're listening to the Saluki Gamescast. This is episode 65 for December 15th, 2023. My name is Justin Young. Joining me is Mario Sanders. How are you doing, Mario?
I'm doing okay. It was a busy and stressful and hectic finals week, but I'm about 90% of the way done. I got a paper that I got to finish up after this, and then some grading, but all that stuff is fairly low.
That's only 10%?
Honestly,
an entire paper and grading?
Oh, I mean, the paper is like also 90% done, but I don't have to write an entire paper. These are, I would say these are like the least stressful things of all the things that had to happen this week. So I'm feeling like I'm in a pretty good place.
Hear that, kids? Your paper that he's grading is the least stressful thing he has to do.
Honestly, yeah. I told them this should be the least stressful final you take. That's my goal. So, I'm still going to take it seriously. But
what class is that for?
The public speaking class.
Oh, okay.
It's actually one of their exams. I already graded their final speeches, but it's just one of their exams. So,
all right, cool. And also joining me is OJ Duncan. OJ, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. I had a pretty low-key week, so I'm not teaching, nor am I taking classes, so finals week isn't a big deal for me like it is for everybody else. So I'm sorry that y'all are going through it, but I've been relaxing.
So what's it like strolling across campus when everybody else is pulling their hair out and contemplating throwing themselves off the library?
So there is a secondhand stress. I was actually talking with someone about that today. Because he works in the School of Medicine, and so finals week is not anything for him. But with everybody else around, it's like it raises the energy and like the anxiety is just in the air. So it's kind of still there. It's been a little anxious week, and like I'm having trouble getting to sleep. I'm having trouble like relaxing a little bit. I'm doing it, but I'm having a little trouble, just because the atmosphere is a little anxious.
You ever seen the movie 50-50, the one with Joseph Gordon-Levitt?
Right. Yeah.
You asking that question reminded me of that scene where he's going in for chemo, either like his first or second time. And he eats an edible with like two of the people that are there. And so he's walking through the hospital at the very end. He's just got this massive smile on his face. Is like, it's just so sad and somber around him. And so I'm just thinking about OJ just like strolling through all happy, whatever song is playing in the background, it's everybody around him. It's just in chaos.
Just everybody hurts. Well, he has a big smile on his face. Yeah, there you go. That's I'd forgotten about that movie, but yeah. We are very sorry, OJ, that we have slightly inconvenienced
we've
you.
been bringing you down.
Yeah, I'll send you my bill.
Let's see. Alicia is out. She went home early and everything, skipped out on all the fun of finals week. So it's just the three of us here for this episode. And this will be our final episode before Christmas break. So we will not have an episode for the next, probably close to a month. We won't be recording any episodes. But we'll be back sometime soon and in January. And then we'll have our Game of the Year podcast and everything, and also our list up on the website. So there will be like quite a lot of fun stuff when we get back. Until then, though, we're going to talk about what we've been playing. So, Mario, what have you been playing?
Yeah, so the one way that I have not lost my mind over during finals week is, and I know I've talked about it, those sort of daily challenges like the Wordle or the connections and stuff like that. Another one that I've really found myself enjoying is Movie to Movie, which is just, it gives you two movies and you have to get from one to the other via the actors in it, a sort of degrees of
Kevin Bacon.
Exactly, a degrees of separation thing. And it's, so simple, but it's a lot of fun. I like that I don't have to I can just go to this website, they show me the movies, and then I can just go through and to do it. And there are some modifiers that they add to it where you can't use MCU movies, which feels fair because every person alive has been in an MCU movie.
Yeah.
You can get from one person to another person very easily. But so it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it. And they've got sort of the whole backlog of previous movies and stuff like that. And I'm not the biggest movie person. So like there are a number of them that I haven't seen, but you know, I enjoy sort of just sitting there and thinking for a little bit and, you know, before actually going through and exploring like, okay, this actor was in this thing who's also in this thing. And so it's a good time. So those little daily things I've been doing still. But the other thing that I just started yesterday is Stardew Valley. I've played Stardew Valley a lot before. So this is not a new or first time playthrough, but it's new in the sense that friends and I in a Discord are doing a sort of massive archipelago multi-world, which is basically, if people aren't familiar, the items in my game or the sort of the checks in my game to get items might be items for another person's game. So I think there are, of all of us playing, there are 51 games, sort of like between all of us. So,
Oh, wow.
you know, and so for Stardew, some of those checks might be, if you've played it before, when you go into the mines, every 5 levels is, you get the elevator shaft. The elevator is progressive. Rather than getting an elevator, I might find like a bow and arrow for a friend who's playing Ocarina of Time. You know, the fishing pole that Willie gives you at the beginning of the game might be, I don't know, gun for a game that has a gun. Sorry.
90% of them.
But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. You know, I've never played Stardew like this before. I think between the combined from those 51 games, there's something like 13,000 different items between all of them. And so like for Stardew, there's like 350 just for Stardew because it's every crop is potentially an item the first time you do it. So like if you were to do like 10 parsnips, the first parsnip might be an item. The rest of them will just be parsnips.
Well, let me ask you, just so I'm making sure I understand this, you're not playing 51 games of Stardew.
No.
You're playing Stardew, but somebody else might be playing, as you said, Ocarina of Time.
So like I've got Stardew, there's Ocarina of Time. I'm going to just go through all the Zeldas. A Link to the Past. Somebody's playing, I think, Pokemon Emerald. Somebody's doing Hollow Knight. Somebody's doing Mega Man Battle Network. And
So this is software that is taking these items out and putting them into your game, and then when you get it, it transfers it over to their game, unlocks it.
yeah, so it's through whatever, I don't know, mod system. It's, I mean, the website is archipelago.gg, and it connects the games together through whatever server you're on, so that when and so another one that is a potential check is just getting a level for all the different sort of categories in Stardew. So like I get a farming level, but in my game I don't actually get a farming level. Instead, it sends whatever item to whatever game that person is playing. And some of them are like useless, right? Like, oh, you sent 5 rupees to so-and-so playing, A Link to the Past, or you sent a mushroom to somebody who's playing SMW or Super Mario World. And so, there are a lot of them that are just like, okay, that's not really, I didn't need that, but
So you playing, you might be gated by somebody else's progress. So you might reach a point where you're like, I can't get any further until somebody unlocks the bow for me.
Absolutely. And so in Stardew, for me, the completion goal for my individual game is to complete the community center. And so, if you've played it, you know that a lot of those things are crops that you have to grow.
Right.
For the game, for the crops that you need, you cannot buy those seeds from the shop. You have to be given those seeds that are found in somebody else's game. So like in order to make the pumpkin that I need to make for the community center, somebody had to send me pumpkin seeds.
Right.
And so there's just Stardew is a lot bigger than I thought it was, at least in terms of like aspect of this multi-world, but I want to say there's probably like 25 to 30 different game options that you could play. There are like 3 or 4 of us who are doing Stardew Valley. So like, I think I one of them was like, oh great, I found my friend's combat level or her mining level. And so all of those like big items that you would buy, so like the barn or the coop or any of those things, when you look at them in the menu to buy them, it says this is the coop, but this is actually so-and-so's hook shot. And so I remember this is the second time we've done this. I didn't join for the first one, but in the first one of them was like somebody's hook shot was on the very bottom of the mines in the 120th floor. But he didn't get elevators past floor 80. So in one day, he had to go from floor 80 to floor 120. Whereas you typically get, like I said, progressive elevators for every 5 floors, and I mean, while I'm sure it was annoying, the easiest way to do that is you go into the mines with just a backpack full of rocks and you just make stairs with them. And so you just like go down really fast. But yeah, it's a really interesting experience. I've always been a big fan of randomizers. My hope is to one day, I'd love to write a paper on them as like an intersection of fan studies and game studies. But then also like for me, the game's community aspect is a big part of my interests. And so I'm having a lot of fun with it. So that's what I just started yesterday, and I chose Stardew because I'll be going back home to the Bay Area, and that's an easy game to travel with since it's already on my computer, and don't have to think about bringing controllers for emulation and stuff like that.
No, that sounds really fascinating. Like, I mean, I'm familiar with randomizers, but and even like the randomizers were like, you're playing Metroid, and when you get to one part, it shoots you over into A Link to the Past.
Yeah.
And then you have to achieve something there to shoot back to Metroid.
Yeah.
This sounds like on a whole other scale than that. I mean, just thinking like the hacking that has to go on for each of these games, and then troubleshooting that so that this actually works, so nobody's getting screwed in the process that they can't progress. That sounds really kind of amazing and cool. And it weirdly sounds like much closer to that idea of the metaverse than anybody else has done with, Fortnite or any of these other games, right? Because you really are, combining all these games into one world that, interacts with one another.
And there are some really funny things that can happen because of it as well. So I think, the first, at least that I was familiar with for these multi-worlds was just Ocarina of Time. So you could link multiple players playing multiple games of Ocarina. So, I might find your hook shot. You might find OJ's bombs. OJ might send something to me. And so there was one really big one that happened where it was like 100 people playing simultaneously. But we're able to do it now, again, in terms of like the complexity of the code or whatever. We're able to do it asynchronously. So when I go log on, if people have been playing, I'm just going to, wake up for the morning and I'll check the mailbox in game, and all those items that people have found since last night will be sent to me through the mail.
It's like when Tom Nook mails you something.
Sure, yeah. But, there was one for the Ocarina of Time one, one of the things that people will set is like, they'll call it ice trap sanity. So any of those items that are not super useful just turn into the ice traps that you would find in the ice cavern. And so people are just getting like ice trapped, over and over and over again, that's what they're sending each other. And so, while I was playing yesterday, it took like 15 minutes because they started on like Monday, but because of finals week, I said like, I probably won't be able to start until like Thursday at the earliest. And, it took me like 15 minutes just opening mail because of all these things that are coming in. And, some of them are obviously useful, but like, some of them, somebody sent me like, sickness or queasiness, whatever like the status effects are. So I'm just like, okay, I guess I can't do this. But like, it was also really nice because like, dang, I got like entirely upgraded tools. You know, I got like iron everything, steel everything before I'm even starting the game. There was one though that, like I said, I like laughed out loud when I sent it, but I can't remember what it was. But then the other thing that's really funny is they have what they call death link. So while it's asynchronous, people are certainly playing and on at the same time.
Sure.
And so when one person dies in their game, Deathlink says everybody else who's currently on also dies in that moment.
No.
And so, you know, a friend was saying like, yeah, one of us was playing Super Mario 64, and I think they were in TikTok clock, and there was a lot of dying in all of our games. So it's a good time. It's really silly. It's really fun, and I think the thing I appreciate about
This is literally Death Note the game.
yeah, you're really annoyed with somebody. You're like, you know what? Here you go. Like I said, it's really fun. It's really silly, and it's just a good time. There's something else I was going to say there, but I don't know what. But so that's what I've been doing, and that's what I'll probably be doing for the next little bit.
Well, that sounds like really amazing, like that software. Yeah. Like I didn't know anything that advanced existed in that area. The randomizers, I think, are really cool, and you know, they had to overcome one of the big problems that, you know, I remember thinking early on with those, which was, well, some of these games are progress based, and if you're randomizing the items where they're located and when you get them and everything, you might not be able to progress through this game anymore. And so I know they fixed that with a lot of those randomizers.
Yeah, a lot of them now in the settings, they're basically have a setting that is like guaranteed completable.
Right.
So yeah, I think Ocarina of Time, at least that's the first one I'm really familiar with. You know, there's like a very complex logic to the way that the program randomizes the ROM that you end up putting into it. And they talk about it as like different spheres. So like, what is sphere 0? There are certain things that you need before you can do anything else. And so,
sure.
And so what I was going to say, actually, I just remembered, the thing I really appreciate about a randomizer is it really, as somebody who's interested in studying games, you really get like a depth of knowledge about a game. Like there is an intimacy with this game and knowing where like basically everything is. And so you really get that like up close reading of it as you're playing through it. So, yeah, like I find them to be a ton of fun. That's what a lot of the stuff that I play is at this point, is a randomizer of just the games that I enjoy. It is almost like a roguelike mode for all of these games that you know people love so much.
I would think one thing that you would get out of that experience is really an understanding and appreciation for what good breadcrumbing does in a game, right? That concept of games not necessarily telling you this is where you go next, but directing you through level design and other mechanics within the game to, oh, you should be going here next. And, you know, like, of course, Metroidvania games are infamous for this.
Yeah.
Really good Metroidvania games like Super Metroid at some point open up and you can basically go anywhere, but the game does try to direct you to a certain spot. And when you start randomizing all of that, then you start going, oh, well, like, yeah, if they didn't put all this thought into this, this game would not be as easy an experience, as good of an experience for somebody playing it the first time, right?
Yeah.
Like you with extensive knowledge of the game, that's not an issue. But like somebody coming to it for the first time, randomized like that, you start to see, oh, this game actually would be less of a good game this way.
That was the first way that I played Super Mario RPG, was randomized.
Oh, really?
Because it was part of a friend's like community event thing, and that was one of the games. And so like he basically wrote up a guide like this is the linear path for you to follow, and so I just did that. But yeah, I couldn't imagine somebody going to Ocarina of Time for the first time in a randomized version, because like how the hell are you supposed to know what items go to what, you know, places?
Right.
I remember there was one, And a Metroidvania is a much better way of putting it than a roguelike. Like there was one where I think it was a friend and I, we were like co-oping it. So we were saying, oh, this thing is here, this thing is there. We had to go into the Shadow Temple to get the boomerang, to get into Jabu, to get something that let us go back to the Shadow Temple, to then, I think, have to go back to Jabu in order to fit. It was just like, it was literally this back and forth between like 2 or 3 places. They're just like, oh my goodness. Like,
it works, but it's not, it's not actually a good experience for somebody doing that the first time.
Absolutely not. But yeah, once you've developed that knowledge, it just turns into a puzzle of, okay, I have all these items. What can I do?
Right.
What is the other chest that I can check? What are the other items I can get that maybe open up other checks that I can do?
So you said there's like spheres of different stuff. So like, would it be possible for like in Super Metroid, all the bosses get checked off real quick and you could just run to the end and beat it?
So Super Metroid is not one that I would be as familiar with, so I can't really answer that one. I think about it more in the sense of like the items that you get are within a certain sphere. So like in Super Metroid, again, I don't even feel comfortable or confident enough to use that as an example. But like Ocarina of Time, the first dungeon you complete might be like the Light Temple, because of the items that you get. That's unlikely because, you know, the further you progress into the game, the more items that you need. But there are certain required items for each dungeon, you know, so it's like, you know, the Shadow Temple, you need the fire, you need Din's fire, you need magic just to open it up. You need a hook shot, you need the hover boots. But if you have all those things, you can complete that dungeon. Logically. You know, there are other ways that if you know how to like do different like glitches and stuff like that, you can get through without certain items. But logically, the game expects you to have all of these items in order to do it. So like one of the, you know, the big sort of key, especially in Ocarina of Time, is the bomb bag. Explosives unlock so many different things in that game. But you can also get bomb chews, which are an explosive, but that isn't always considered part of the logic. And so just because you can get in there doesn't mean that the game expects you to get in there. So that's also part of that puzzle, is like, is this actually useful for me to go here if the game doesn't expect me to be here at this point? And so yeah, like I said, it's a lot of fun. I always have a good time with it, and I've had a good time with Stardew. Stardew's a comfy time and just adds another layer of a way to play it. So
yeah, really fascinating. I think that is probably quite suitable for some paper on. And I can't say that I've ever read anything on randomizers. So, all right. Is that it?
Basically, yeah.
All right. OJ, what have you been playing?
So I've been playing 3 things. First, I'll talk about Harmony of Despair again. I really love the game. It's really great, but there's so much farming. The game is just farming. It's farming the game, really, honestly. And so...
Wait, it's got more farming than Stardew Valley we just talked about?
Stardew has fishing, too.
But yeah, so Soma... if y'all are familiar with the Castlevania game, Soma, who is like a reincarnation of Dracula, kind of, collects souls from enemies that he kills. And you can get 9 souls of each enemy in the game. There are a lot of enemies in the game. Charlotte, who's my favorite, and I have her maxed out, but you learn... you have to absorb spells from different enemies to learn it. And so she gets stronger every spell that she does. And like her weapon doesn't change, but it gets stronger. And bigger every time you do it. And so I want to max all the characters out, but it's a lot because every character levels up differently. So Shanoa, you have to use her weapons and her magic, and then she gets more powerful and her weapons get more powerful. All the whip users from the various different games that are in there, they have hunting, like you have to use the cross a certain amount of times, and it gets real long. To level things up. So I was like, well, I'm going to play a little bit here and there, just like, and over time I'll get everyone leveled up, right? Then I've been playing Diablo IV. Really, really love the game. There's a Christmas event going on right now, and there's a a weird goat Santa killer that you can kill. I mean, if it's Diablo, yeah.
I mean, is it Krampus?
No, it's Red Cloak.
Santa or Satan?
So, well, I mean, they're very linked in Diablo. But yeah, no, Red Cloak or Red Coat or something is what his name is. So it's a goat Santa. And then, so I've just been playing through pretty slowly through the game, just enjoying it, exploring all the areas, doing dungeons and stuff like that. I love Sorcerer. I've always loved Sorcerer throughout all of the iterations of Diablo. So it's pretty fun. I have a Chain Lightning build and everything just dies. That's just, I mean, it's the top leveling one. And like, it's like, oh, I just hit 2 buttons and everybody died. So, but it's fun. I like that it's the storyline has changed a little bit from the other Diablos. It's not, oh no, Diablo is coming. Oh no, the primevals are coming. There's a little bit more of a storyline in there too. And then I've only played a little bit, so don't get too excited. But I started playing Celeste. But I'm really only like 10 screens in or something like that.
Moment of truth.
So I just went until I found a guy that was camping there, and I talked to him a bunch. Yeah. So like right at the beginning, but the wall jumping is okay.
It's not that bad.
Yeah.
The fact that you can grab onto the wall, you've got, there's a.
So I haven't been. I mean, I know I will have problems with it later. I can see how it's going to get frustrating. I'm sure it's going to get frustrating. But I'm really liking what I played so far. But I just played some this morning, so I didn't get too far into it.
Nice.
Yeah.
I will say that game never got very frustrating for me. Not playing through the main part. Now, when you get to the B-sides, like some of that gets pretty frustrating.
Okay.
But like, I never really got that frustrated. Not at the game. There were times I think I probably got frustrated with myself, like, oh, I know exactly what I need to do, and this is entirely me failing to do this. It's not one of those situations where I'm like, I don't understand how this works.
Yeah.
Like, I understand what I'm supposed to do here, and I'm just not getting the timing 100% right. But I was never even stuck on anything long enough to get really mad at the game. It was the sort of situation where, okay, I'm going to put this down and I'm going to come back to it tomorrow, and then I'll get through it.
Okay.
And I think that's part of the reason I enjoyed that game so much, was because I never got frustrated enough with it where it made me want to quit or anything.
Yeah, I remember using it, and I compared it to, are either of you familiar with I Want to Be the Guy?
Yeah.
So like similar in that like it is very much trial and error to like get through a screen, but like in drastically different manners. Like so different that you know, they're really not even comparable in many ways. But like the attempts that it takes, you know, in order to like, oh no, I need to do it at this time, or I need to do it at that time. I think it's I think that's one of the things that I like about it. And there's something about the movement in Celeste that is just really satisfying. And so I'm glad to hear that you've enjoyed it thus far.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to playing it more. I'm glad you both said that about not getting frustrated, though, because I was like, I could get frustrated.
Well, Justin said that. There are definitely times but
yeah, but
well, I mean, you get frustrated, but like it's never, you know, there are times with games where I get mad at the game and I'm like, this is just poorly designed and I'm dying over and over again because this is a bad design. I never felt that way in playing through Celeste.
And I would agree with that. Like, I definitely get frustrated, but I think, as Justin said, it's more like I know I can do this. It's right there.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just doing it. It's not like there's nothing in it that feels unfair.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was playing that, and also, so I'm talking to somebody who plays Yu-Gi-Oh competitively. I've never actually played it before, so I downloaded Master Duel to start learning on my phone. So learning how to play the Yu-Gi-Oh card game, it's very complicated.
That game has gotten so massive since when I played it as a kid. Yeah, it can definitely, I can see how it would be daunting.
Yeah, especially because I know nothing. I'm like, I don't even know how many cards I'm supposed to have, and then and there's tutorials, but it's like, oh, hey, put these in 3 order, and oh, look, the entire like world exploded or something. You know, look at how you can do that, and I'm like,
I think that's the thing about like a lot of those card games, whether it's Yu-Gi-Oh or Pokemon or Magic. It's like it's learning a new language, like absolutely, like just all of the mechanics and the interactions and the synergies. It's there's so much depth there that even Marvel Snap, like that's supposed to be like sort of, you know, meant to be approachable by anybody. And I'm sure it is. I still have never played it. But there's still a lot that goes into it. You can enter into that base level and, you know, make it more complex as you go on for sure. So
yeah, I think that's something we talked about last year with Marvel Snap was that it was so approachable compared to those other games that you mentioned, right? Like, I have nothing inherently against Magic the Gathering, but you're right. I don't want to invest that time to learn to play it. Whereas Marvel Snap was one of those things you could pick up and start playing, you know, pretty much immediately. And yeah, there's more advanced techniques and, you know, strategies that you can get. But like, I feel like that's still a game you can pick up and play, and you are not having to devote, you know, years of your life to learning in the same way that I feel like Magic the Gathering is at this point.
Oh, you need a guide, like a literal like human like tour guide almost to teach you. Like there's no way I would have gotten into it if it wasn't for living with my friend and he played it and he was like, "Oh, do you want to, you know, try it?" And I would just like, I would sit him, he would, you know, be looking at his cards or organizing them as we were having a conversation. And so it's just like, you know, these little sparks that happen of like, oh, sure, I'll do it.
Right.
But like, if it weren't for him, there's no way I would have gotten into it or even attempted to get into it if I had interest, because it's just like, that's way too much.
Well, I mean, it always makes me think of, and, you know, like people kind of ridicule people over this, but like trying to explain professional sports to somebody who doesn't watch them. Like, I mean, I remember watching the Super Bowl with a friend who did not watch football and did not know, other than like 4 downs, like did not know the basic rules. So, you know, when they're calling, you know, pass interference or intentional grounding, they're like, okay, well, what does that mean? And then you're trying to explain, well, it sort of means this, but like there's actually like these sub rules. And, you know, I think that's what playing Magic the Gathering is probably like. It's like learning something at least that complex.
Yeah. Yep. So all that is to say, I completely understand where you're coming from with why why Yu-Gi-Oh is like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, and so he suggested that I buy like structure decks or something and put one together. It's like trap tricks or something, which they're little. It's flowers who kill men, and I'm like, ooh, I love that. So I'm very excited about that. I'm gonna go pick those up. And then I saw there's a Yu-Gi-Oh tournament, and this is just regular card, not the video one, but there's one a game shop in town. It's A to Z TCG. Trading A to Z trading card games.
Oh, I just don't know. I figure that's what we
That's
were
the
talking
place
about.
over by the co-op, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I do know. I knew you remember that.
Yeah.
They're new.
Yeah.
Or relatively, like
I
last
bet,
year.
you know, when
Like 2 or 3 years.
going to the farmers,
Oh,
farm
that
near
long?
their farmers market as well. I've driven right by it. So
Yeah. So the owner Randy, we played Pokemon Go together for a while, and so he's real good people. And but they're doing a tournament tonight, a Yu-Gi-Oh tournament, and it's for charity. So people bring canned food items and like non-perishable food items, and they play games. And then if you win, you take someone else's food, like one of their items. I think everyone brings 3 items, and then you can trade those items in for Yu-Gi-Oh card packs.
Cool.
And then so they're collecting food and stuff like that. So I might stop by tonight and check that out.
that's a great idea.
Yeah.
What if you just want the food?
Yeah. This is a college town.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Daddy has to eat.
But yeah, so I might go and check, and so I can see people in person playing. And I think if I had the actual cards, then I could read and like continually look at, rather than having to tap on this one over here and be like, wait, how do these go together? I can just look at them right next to each other.
There's something about the physical aspect of it that I'm sure if the very first time playing Magic I was like only online, it's hard to because the program of those online games do like keep track of like what each card is doing and their interactions. It's useful because you don't miss like anything that's like any of those synergies or those interactions or things that trigger something else. But if that's the first way you're playing it, you might not be able to like, well, what just happened here? I don't know why this thing happened. And so being able to like read those cards next to each other, when blah, blah, blah happens, this thing happens. Yeah. So no, I hope you do go, and I hope that you are able to just sort of sit and watch. I don't know if you plan on playing at all, but.
Oh no, I'm sure there are competitive people there, and I mean, I'll probably donate food.
Sure, just bring a couple cans.
Yeah, like just here.
But I think, I made a joke about it, but like that actually is like a really clever idea as a way to do a fundraiser, essentially, right?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
So I might go see if I can pick up some cards and then watch people play and see what's going on there. Cool. Other than that, I think that's all I've been playing right now.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
He did say he has an easy week.
Right. Yeah. There's no way I'd have the time to like try to learn Yu-Gi-Oh during finals week.
Yeah. And so for Diablo, I've only finished the first act so far, but I mean, just playing through and going through the dungeons and stuff, I've leveled up quite a bit. So I'm not max level yet, but I know there's stuff after max level too that you can do. But yeah, so I'm enjoying all of the games. It's a nice thing after like trying to do the jumps in Mario RPG or the wall jumps in Super Mario Wonder.
Have you returned to either of those?
No.
Okay.
I don't think I will.
Well, fair enough.
I'm like, I can, if I want to do wall jumps, I'll play Celeste.
Well, it's one of those things where it's like, if you want to feel the stress and chaos that all of us are feeling, just play that. Put yourself.
Okay, fair.
Finals week is basically like doing the 100 jumps.
Yeah, these are my finals, and I'm going to get an F this semester.
At Mario U.
But yeah, and so I think Mario RPG would be easy enough to pick up and try and do the jumps, but that's all I have left on it. I have everything else.
That's true. You did say you did basically everything.
Yeah. Super Mario Wonder, I think, would be much harder to pick up and try and do it again. Even now, after a month or so, I don't even remember how long it's been. But yeah, I don't think I could. I don't think I'll do it. So I don't think I could.
I think you'd be surprised how much that sticks with you. I mean, you might not get it on the first try, but yeah.
But I might throw my Switch. Is the problem.
Also fair, I guess.
Well, you need to like play it, connect it to your TV. Don't play it in handheld mode.
No, you have to for that because there's a delay.
Oh, right. You talked about that.
Yeah. So, yeah. So that's all I have for this week.
All right. Let's see. So it is finals week, so I do not have the time that OJ has. So I only played one thing a little bit, which was SteamWorld Build. So if you're not familiar with the SteamWorld games, this is a whole series of games, and it's basically using the same sort of characters in each game, but each game is set in kind of like a new genre. So there's been SteamWorld Dig and SteamWorld Heist and SteamWorld, I don't know. I can't think of other ones now offhand, but they've done like, I feel like 5 or 6 of these games at this point. So like they are running through the genres of potential games. And the thing that's been fairly consistent through this series is that they're all of pretty good quality. Like they're all pretty good games. Some are better than others. I think particularly the SteamWorld Dig games are really good. SteamWorld Dig 2, I think, is like an amazing game. I think it's one of those games that people are going to look back and be like, oh, this is like one of those underrated gems, despite the fact that people who play that game sing its praises so much. It's a Metroidvania where you're digging. So as you're going through, you have to dig, but you have to get new upgrades that allow you to dig and new materials and everything. So SteamWorld Build is a city builder. So think like a SimCity style game. But it's still a SteamWorld game. So it is still set in that like kind of world and environment. So you're like sort of like an almost Old West style environment, but all your characters are robots. So they're all kind of like steampunkish looking robots. And you start off building this little city, and it plays very much like a SimCity game. You have to build places for people to live, and then you have to build a market for them, and then you have to build a new train station. The train starts coming, and you can trade with other places. But then there's also a mine that you have to get open. And so once you get the mine open, then it opens up a whole new part of the game where you are building underground in order to have your characters mine out the underground. So you have to build here's a base for our miners, here's a base for our engineers, here's our base for several other categories of workers, and then you have to direct them go over here and mine, go over here and build this. You have to build a bridge because there's chasms underground that you have to cross. And that is a really fun part of the game. The above ground stuff is very SimCity-like, and so is a lot of, your people are upset because they don't have access to this thing, so you have to figure out how to get them access of it. So... And, there's a radius around each building, so they have to be built within that radius. And that can get kind of frustrating if you have a lot of experience playing city builder games. It's a lot of that. The underground stuff is fantastic. If the entire game was that, I'd be over the moon with this game. It's really a lot of fun. And, you're kind of having to do stuff above ground that opens up new tools that then you can use underground to go further and deeper into the mines. I didn't get a chance to play a ton of it, but so far they've continued to introduce new concepts, at a fairly regular basis. And I like it so far.
Sorry.
Oh, no. Go ahead.
I was saying, is this a new game?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it just came out the beginning of December.
Okay. Brand new.
Yeah, last week. And it is on Xbox Game Pass. So you can play it. I know you have Game Pass, so you can play it on there free and everything. I am playing it on the PC and mostly using a mouse and keyboard to play it, though there is the ability to play it with a controller. Because it's a city builder game, I just did not want to play it that way. But people are playing City Skylines on consoles, which seems crazy to me. But however you want to play it that way. I think the controls is very much designed to be played around a controller, though. You can kind of tell in the design and everything. But it's a lot of fun so far. Mostly because of the stuff underground. If it was just the stuff above ground, I would not be nearly as enthusiastic about it. The underground stuff just makes it something where I want to see what's next. And there's kind of a cool story going on with, these sort of ancient items, and you're trying to build a rocket to get off the planet and everything. So, and it is not at all being subtle with its hinting that maybe some of the people are more nefarious than they're letting on. So we'll see where that goes. But, also an opportunity to say, hey, SteamWorld Dig 2, that game is on sale all the time. If you've never played it, that game is entirely worth $10 to play through that game.
Yeah, I played the first one. I think it must have been on the DS. I don't know if it was on anything else. But and I remember enjoying it. I mean, it's been so long, but and I knew they did Heist. I feel like I probably knew they did 2. But that's cool that I hadn't really ever considered that each one was sort of exploring a new genre of play. So that's really cool.
This sounds really, really, really fun.
Yeah. I mean, well, you've got an Xbox now, so you can join in. If you have Game Pass, it's entirely worth your time to try it.
Absolutely.
Right? I think that's the cool thing about Game Pass is Like I have a history with the SteamWorld games. I really like them as a series, even though some hit better than others. So I probably would have eventually played this regardless. But I do know there's a lot of people who would look at a game like this and say, well, I'm not going to spend $20 on that. Whereas on Game Pass, they will maybe give it a shot. And, and that's really cool because it means people will like discover new genres maybe that they'll be interested in. So that does it for what we've been playing. Let's move on to the news. And by far the biggest news of the week has been that E3 is officially dead again. So,
but officially.
E3 obviously had already been canceled for 2024, but like there was speculation, well, they might try to come back in 2025. They might try to, put it off a couple of years and then bring it back again. The ESA, who runs E3, came out and put out an official release and said, hey, it's gone permanently. It's not coming back. Now, that doesn't stop them from 5 years from now coming back with this, because there's obviously still some cachet in that brand name, right, for a lot of people. But, this has just been gone too long, on its last legs for too long. There's been too many public disasters surrounding E3. It's just hard to imagine this coming back anytime soon. I mean, I'm saying 5-10 years, at a minimum, before we see this come back in some form.
Yeah. When was the last one? 2019? It was at least pre-pandemic.
Well, they did do an online one post-pandemic.
Okay.
That like nobody really paid attention to. I think that was maybe the first year of the Summer Games Fest. So maybe what would that have been, 2 or 3 years ago?
Maybe 2021. Yeah. 2020.
So yes, the last in-person one was pre-pandemic. So that would have been 2019, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. I saw, like an Onion article. Maybe you even shared it in the chat that we have, but it was something like PlayStation and Nintendo skip E3's funeral for their own announcement or something like that, for their own recognition.
No, that wasn't me. I didn't see that. But I mean,
good. But I think it's good, and it's funny because of how true it is, right? Like there's just so many of those big, companies that have just sort of moved on to do their own thing. But I feel like we've talked about it on this podcast before, or at the very least we've talked about it beforehand or afterwards, that, the people most hurt by this are the indie studios, right? Like this is the event where, they would get to show off the game that nobody had ever heard of. Nobody even probably knew of its existence, but they got to try it out and got to tell all their friends about it. Oh, check this game out. This game finally came out, blah, 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 blah. And so it's disappointing. I mean, that was always such a fun week just to be online talking with other people, seeing how other people reacted and responded to all the stuff that was getting shown.
Yeah, I mean, next month will be the Consumer Electronics Show. And for people who don't know the history, E3 grew out of the Consumer Electronics Show. Like video game companies used to go to the Consumer Electronics Show and show off their new games. And they would be relegated basically outside across a parking lot next to the people displaying like porn, because it would be at the same time as like the adult video awards and everything. So there's like some interesting stories from that era of video games. And basically the industry grew and became big enough. And so they created E3, and it was a trade show. So, back in an era where there were more retail businesses, you would have companies like Target and Walmart and Kmart and Venture and all these sorts of places, Sears. They needed to know what video games to order for, that Christmas. And so they would go to E3 and they would show off, all the companies would show off their new hardware, their new games. And so Sears could say, hey, that Super Nintendo, that sure looks like it's going to be popular. Give us 100,000 of those, for our stores for this Christmas. And that's what it grew out of. And of course, then it became like this monstrosity where companies were spending, millions each year building these huge booths. And like I was showing a class, a week or two ago, some of the booths, and, they were like creating a fake New Orleans, and they would have people up on the second floor, like throwing beads at attendees as they walked by. And that's all to promote Mafia 3. Right. And so you can, it was almost like a Disney exhibit level of quality that they were doing with all of this. And that's just gone.
Yeah.
And we don't have anything that's really the equivalent of that for all your PAXs and other events. They have a very different focus than E3 used to have. And so there's something really sad about losing that. But I mean, the point of the Onion article and that you were making, Mario, is that Nintendo and Sony don't need that, and Microsoft as well. And I started this by talking about CES. Apple used to go to CES. Apple used to show off their new computers at CES, and at some point Apple realized, hey, we're big enough, we're making enough news that the media should come to us, and we're just going to have our own press conference. And everybody has followed suit and copied that. Samsung does that. Google does that. Nintendo, PlayStation, they started doing that. And, of course, there's still lots of electronics manufacturers who will show up at CES next month in Las Vegas to show off their new electronics. And that's the only way that they'll get noticed, because they're not an Apple. They're not a PlayStation. They're not that big to draw that attention to some press conference that they have. And that makes CES still worthwhile for those companies. But you're right. Like for these smaller companies, they're just kind of getting like lost in the mix at this point, right? Like nobody's going to like pay attention to these indies nearly as much. You're not going to get a, your Guitar Hero coming out of it. Like people don't realize Guitar Hero started out as an indie company, like producing that. That was a little small company producing Guitar Hero, and then Activision bought them and turned it into this huge multi-billion-dollar franchise. That seems like harder for those companies to get that spotlight.
Yeah, because I imagine PAX is like the one of the other places that they would go to, but there's not nearly as much coverage, or you don't hear I feel like I don't hear what comes out of PAX. I mean, maybe if it's something huge, but there's not really anything that there's no public sort of coverage of that. Maybe you hear something coming out of I don't know what the acronym was, a GDC, the Game Developers Conference, right? But same thing. I feel like I don't. The only things that I feel like I hear coming out of that are like from academics who attend, like what they post about it on Twitter.
You get the enthusiast press, right? So you'll get your GameSpots, you'll get your IGNs, but what you're not getting that E3 got was USA Today, Washington Post, the LA Times, right? NBC News. Like you would get the mainstream media. And maybe there's an argument to be made, right? That the mainstream media is not as valuable as it once was when we have social media and influencers and all of that that can get this message out. But, we were just talking about this, what was it, last week? Like, my brother doesn't follow GameSpot.
Yeah.
So when he finds out about a video game, it's because that video game, like, has oftentimes crossed over into more mainstream news coverage. So your Grand Theft Autos, your Red Deads, your, Halos, like he'll hear about those. But he's much less likely to find out about, some little, like Dave the Diver.
Yeah.
Like, I can't imagine he's heard a word about Dave the Diver unless I say something to him at Christmas about it. And it's not because he doesn't care. He just doesn't follow those channels.
Yeah. Yeah, I know whenever, my mom and stepdad will ask, me and my step siblings, like, oh, put together a little Christmas list and I'll put a couple games on there. And then they'll be like, well, I didn't even know this was a thing. Like, what is this all about? So I think I have like Alan Wake 2 on it.
Sure.
And so my mom just sent me this article about it. She's like, oh, I saw this article and I had never even heard of this game, or I didn't know anything about it, but it sounds really interesting. Just, and thinking about like the concept and the storyline and stuff like that. But yeah, it's I think there are a lot of people, probably people who listen to this podcast who are like, oh, the mainstream media, they're not needed at stuff like that because IGN is there, and they're going to know what they're talking about. They're going to have that depth of knowledge, but it's for the people who don't follow those things. It's for, the people who are not finding themselves in games culture, who would describe themselves as a gamer, or even somebody somebody who has an interest in games, but they get that interest, or they, sort of see it from the outside in. And so, yeah, I think that that's absolutely, a great point to bring up, and that there is that is being missed, when the mainstream media isn't able to talk about these games.
And I think Alan Wake 2 is a perfect example, right? Here we have one of the most praised games of the year, right? A game that wins, well, it doesn't win Game of the Year, but it won a big award at the event. Yeah, Narrative of the Year, I think you're right. And this is a huge game, but it's also a game that I think has a lot of crossover appeal, right? For people who are fans of Stephen King, people who are fans of Twin Peaks, those sorts of people would like to play Alan Wake.
And that's how I talked about it with my mom. I think I had didn't say a name, like, oh yeah, the game I've been looking at, it's sort of Twin Peaks-esque. And she's like, oh, that sounds really interesting. And so...
Yeah, and one of the things that I have found is, so for the women's conference that is held here on campus every year, Alicia and I have presented at that the past few years, and one of the years we did on video games. So, it was myself, Alicia, and two other women presenting on a panel. And then, of course, most of the attendees at that conference are women. And when we got to the end of it, they all started talking, in the chat, they were all talking about Horizons. Like, I don't even know if we mentioned Horizons, but they were all talking about Horizons, right? And these were women who played video games, but like, I'm not sure all of them were what we'd think of as diehard fans. Like, I'm not sure they're on the NeoGAF boards posting every day. And there was something about that game that grabbed their attention, where every person in that chat was like, either playing Horizons or really wanted to play Horizons. And that's not necessarily the audience that's following like this sort of stuff always, right? Alicia might have been the odd woman out in that group with that, in that respect. But I think that's also the audience that would really like an Alan Wake 2.
Sure.
And they're not going to find out about it, maybe, or it's going to be much more difficult to alert them and make them aware that this sort of game is like out and getting, and would appeal to them if they played it. So yeah, I think that's one of the big losses with the loss of E3. That sort of mainstream public discourse over video games. We get that with film. We get that sometimes with literature, not as much as we used to. We still get it with music, though almost exclusively Beyonce and Taylor Swift. But, like when you think about art, part of the appreciation of art is for it to be a public discussion about it and not to be hidden away on message boards exclusively.
So I think we should all take a moment of silence to press F to pay respects for E3.
F for E3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's enough.
I mean, I do wonder, like, Summer Games Fest, this now leaves that market completely wide open for them. You kind of have to wonder, like, are they going to try to do something bigger?
I would assume that they will.
And then, what does Nintendo do? Because one would have thought Nintendo, if there were a traditional E3 still going on, that would have been a big coming out for the Switch 2.
Sure.
It might not have been the announcement, because it wasn't the announcement for the Switch. They held a separate announcement event. But then at E3, like, they have a big coming out for it, right?
To show it off, people could put hands on it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And you sort of think, like, okay, well, Switch 2's, surely coming out this next year.
Well, and in that sense, I feel like it's similar to the conversation we're having about Yu-Gi-Oh! There's a very different experience being able to hold a console or a controller in your hand than just seeing a picture of it.
Yeah.
Or seeing it in a video.
Yeah, I mean, particularly with these new consoles, right? When you're talking about 4K and HDR and these sorts of technologies, those don't transfer over YouTube.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, even if YouTube tells you you're getting a 4K stream, it's not the same bit rate as watching it in person. So, yeah, I mean, there is something about actually going and physically seeing it in person and getting that hands-on experience and everything, particularly for people who are going to be talking about this, journalists, influencers, all those sorts.
Well, and I would think especially for a company like Nintendo, where, we've talked about it so much, the ways that they try and push, technology, or like push, they are the ones that are putting out these weird consoles that are doing something different. Would the Wii have been anywhere near as successful if people weren't able to put, their hands on it or report it? Probably, but like there's something about being able to, especially these ones where there is like a physical aspect to it.
Sure.
The same way there is with, the Switch, or at least that's how it was initially marketed, was that, the
rooftop parties,
right? And the gyro and like the controllers and stuff like that. I would think they would especially want this sort of in-person thing to be able to put their console in somebody's hands, if it's going to be a handheld thing, or if it's going to be a hybrid between a handheld and a console, the way that the Switch is. I think that, again, sort of as you bring it up, that I'll be interested to see how they market the Switch 2. Again, people are going to buy it because it's Nintendo, because of how, great the original one is. But, like I said, there's just a lot of loss with E3 being canceled, and as of now, seemingly nothing to replace it.
Yeah, when you talk about those sorts of technologies, I mean, I was just talking to a class about VR and how difficult VR is to conceptualize, looking at pictures or even videos online of it, that you really need to experience it. And that experience is very different than anything you can see, right? And so how do you, like, if VR is ever going to happen, and I'm not sure that it is anytime soon, given, the kind of train wreck that PSVR 2 has been. But you kind of think, like with Sony, what are you going to do? Are you going to make any more software for this? How are you going to sell that software? Like, you can't even demonstrate this to journalists, let alone to the general public. How do you get people hyped for this at this point? And it seems like the loss of these sorts of events, these large in-public events, like really damages the game industry in that regard. Like, yeah, Nintendo doesn't need E3. They can do their slick trailer and put that out and everything, and people will watch it, and games media will talk about it and everything. But, when they're launching a new console, it does seem like it's a net loss for all these companies just in pure PR. So, we'll see. I imagine that Jeff Keighley, he had the Game Awards this week and finds out that the next week that E3 is dead. This is like Christmas came early for Keighley. Let's see. Well, we've been talking a lot about the Xbox and about the deal of the week. So this is, as Mario has titled it, Justin's great deal of the week. Costco is selling the Xbox Series S as low as $150. Last night, I sent you all on our chat a post about Walmart had the Xbox Series S as low as, I think it was like $138 on there.
Sounds right.
And the Xbox Series X has officially dropped its price to $400 for Christmas. Of course, OJ, you got yours for, I think, $350.
Yeah.
And they were still some places selling them at $350. So even though the official price drop is to $400, they are still out there at $350.
Yeah.
Microsoft is going aggressive with some price cuts here.
Right.
Yeah, $150 is kind of nuts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was like, I wish we had a Costco here because I would get one for a gift for somebody. Or like, so Castlevania Harmony of Despair is multiplayer, but nobody plays anymore because it's from 2010. And so I was like, maybe I can buy an Xbox for someone so they can play with me. Like, so.
And they got $150 though. That is a reasonable price that parents can buy that for kids.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, that's not a budget busting price anymore.
Yeah,
I get $500 is a lot to spend on a kid at Christmas.
absolutely.
You know, like when I understand inflation's different, money's different, but like when I was a kid, you didn't ask for things that were over $200 for Christmas.
Yeah.
And even then that was like your big thing. That was like, you know, you got a Super Nintendo and then you didn't get anything else at Christmas.
That might be the only thing that you got.
Right. And like, you know, when you start talking $400-$500, like I get a lot of parents balking at that price, but like when you start getting something down at $150, I think a lot of parents can say, oh, well, you know, like even if we don't have a lot of money, we can afford that. And, you know, like Billy won't get anything else, but like that'll be his present. You know, Susie gets this instead of, you know, 2 or 3 American Girl dolls. I don't know. Those American Girl dolls are really expensive too. They're like $150 to $200. But like, you know, you start to see this as an impulse purchase.
Sure.
More.
Yeah. There are absolutely people who would be like, oh, that's only $150. You know, that's going to give them that pause that rather than the, oh my God, that's $500. Like, no, $150, you walk by there and you're like, okay, like you, as you're walking around the rest of the store, you're thinking about it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean, I think this speaks to a bigger problem for Microsoft, which is they are losing this console generation badly. You know, they need to move hardware, you know, just to get people buying games on there, to get people subscribing to Game Pass. And, you know, they need to be aggressive with the price cuts. And it's kind of crazy to think we're several years into this console generation and nobody had cut the price yet on either system, you know, either Sony or Microsoft, or for that matter, Nintendo. Nintendo is still selling the Switch at $300. You know, it's been out 7 years.
yeah. What is the Lite at? The Lite's a little bit cheaper, but still, I think that's still probably 200 or 150 at the absolute lowest.
I think it's $200 or $250.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think they've ever officially cut the price on the Lite. Like whatever it came out at, I think it's still selling officially at that price. I mean, there's been some like, you know, limited time price cuts where you get like an OLED Switch for like $315 or something instead of $350.
Sure.
But you know, I don't think there's been any official price cuts on it either. But that's Nintendo. Nintendo doesn't cut their prices
On anything.
Until after I buy a game, then it goes on PPC for cheap.
Well, yeah. I mean, yes, there are situations like that. But I mean, Nintendo is still selling, you know, Breath of the Wild for $60. Like, they, you know, it's not like there's a player's choice line anymore where you can get that for $20 or $30. So yeah, I mean, if you want an Xbox, there are deals out there, and I think that 150 particularly at that price point, I can see that moving a lot of Xboxes this Christmas.
Yeah, and this might not be Justin's great deal of the week. This might just be Justin's great deal, just like in perpetuity.
Hey, I mean, you know, if I knew somebody who was shopping for a new console, I would tell them, if you can get that system at 150, that's a really appealing price. If you don't mind going all digital, particularly with Game Pass though, right? Like that's a really compelling deal.
Well, and it goes back to the conversation we were just having about those people who are maybe on the fringe of like games culture or being a gamer, where it's like, again, and for them, they're like, I would love to play this game, but I don't want to spend $500 about it. I think I've talked about, there's a friend in this program, and they were like, I really want to try out Hogwarts Legacy, but I don't want to spend $200 or $300 on a brand new system.
Right.
Like, $150, for those people who are like, oh, I like games, but I don't really think of myself as such. That's an affordable entry point, at least an affordable entry point for a lot of people. That's not to say that anybody can spend $150 at any given moment, but it's a far more affordable entry point than we've had in a long time, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, like we often talk about these people as like your frat house gamers, right?
Sure.
The guy who buys a PlayStation to play Call of Duty and Madden each year, and almost nothing else. Or maybe there is a third game, right? And that third game changes every year. It's like whatever appeals to them catches their eye. Maybe it's Spider-Man 2 this year,
Sure.
right? But like that has traditionally been a compelling market for video games. It's the reason why you get the guy with like the 5 o'clock shadow on the cover of every video game, because like, that's why the Uncharted games and the BioShock Infinite and like all those games have the same cover because they appeal to that particular demographic.
Sure.
And, for that demographic, like $500 is a lot to invest. And, I'll go back again. I knew a lot of women college students that owned a Wii, because the Wii was fairly cheap and it was something you could play with a group of friends and everything. And it wasn't a huge investment, right, up front. I could see a lot of that market also saying $150. Oh, I can play Hogwarts.
Sure.
I can play, whatever else like might be appealing.
Well, and those people are probably not going to care about it being digital, but like the way I justified the first like big console I bought for myself was, this is like, at this point, consoles are now like an entertainment system. You can do Netflix on there,
Sure.
and Hulu or Spotify and all of the other apps that you want to watch and stream your stuff. And so it sort of becomes a do everything machine. And so for $150, I certainly understand why it will move like a lot of these consoles.
Yeah, and so that whole entertainment center aspect is why I got the Xbox for $350, because like I was losing access to the PS5.
Oh, yeah.
And so like all my streaming's on there. You can do whatever you want on it, and games. So
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great price. So, yeah, it is my continuing deal throughout Christmas. If you can get the S at $150 or the X at $350, $400 is a little harder to recommend, but at $350, those are like pretty amazing prices.
Yeah.
And I would recommend either of those. I've gotten a lot of use out of my X. Let's see. Fantastic. A game studio has shut down 1 week after the release of The Day Before. So The Day Before, if you're not familiar, was their MMO that was a post-apocalyptic zombie game that looked an awful lot like The Last of Us. Like even the title treatment for the logo looked like a complete ripoff of The Last of Us. There have been several videos released in the last few weeks leading up to its release, and I guess its actual release when people actually got to play it, that were taking those trailers and basically dissecting them and saying, okay, well, they stole this shot from this other game. And it wasn't so much that they actually, I don't think they actually stole elements, but they just recreated a particular shot, like to try to get people to like feel in the positive way they feel about that original game by watching this trailer. So a lot of people had been saying, hey, this game looks like it's going to be a scam. Well, they released the game, and a week later, they are shutting down the studio. People basically started to riot on Steam on the message boards over this. And so now they've come out and said, hey, we're working with Steam to do full refunds for anyone who bought this game. So a total cluster right here with this.
Wow. I kind of want to play it now.
You can't. It's not for sale anymore.
I know,
they
but
pulled
like,
it from Steam.
Now I want to. I didn't before, but since it's pulled, it's like
it's amazing how that works. Some game you never had any interest in. The moment somebody says you can't play this, you can't get it anymore.
Never even heard of it.
Yeah, but I'm gonna have to find those videos because I want to see.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. Fantastic Studio is also like the most generic name I could possibly think of.
Yeah. We are awesome games.
This is not
we
a front.
Fantastic Studio. Yeah.
It really does sound like one of those like Chinese studios where like somebody picked the name. They were like, "What means good in English?" And they're like, "Fantastic," and we'll put that. They do a joke about that on the Simpsons. So yeah. I mean, people lost their job. The studio shut down. There's something sad about that. I think it always felt a little fishy. We've seen several this may be the most high-profile case of this, but we've seen cases of this with studios way over-promising for a game, and then the game comes out, or maybe it never comes out, and fans feel pretty burned and jaded over it.
Yeah, I mean, with Cyberpunk, they should have closed them down after that came out.
Well, people are happy with Cyberpunk now. Now that they put out the DLC, people are actually happy with where it stands, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, there were people who were saying that the DLC would have been, rightfully nominated for Game of the Year.
Yeah.
A lot of people really loved it.
I'm just as surprised as you are, OJ.
Yeah, where it started, certainly.
Yeah.
Speaking of another game getting canned, Naughty Dog has scrapped their work on The Last of Us Online. This was also known as Factions. This was their sort of persistent online multiplayer shooter. They put out a statement alongside this. So we already knew that this game had been kind of put back into development, that they had done a check using some of the Bungie developers, and that those developers had said, hey, this game needs a lot of work.
That's what I was going to ask, is this the same game that Bungie looked at? Okay.
And so Naughty Dog put out a statement. In that statement, they said, hey, our ambitions for this were maybe too grandiose, and we started looking at it, and to put out the product that we want and to continue to support that would basically mean our entire development team would have to continue to work on this game full time. And that would mean we could not make anything else. That would mean no more single player games coming out of Naughty Dog. And they said, for that reason, we are ceasing development on this and going to, just cut our losses. Some people have speculated, well, if this was really an amazing game, couldn't you just staff up? And that's hard to know, right? Because you say that to Nintendo, hey, Nintendo, why don't you just staff up and put out a Mario game every year? And then the logic starts to seem goofy to you because you go, well, because not everybody can produce that. Like, you have the very top developers. Not everybody else can produce a Mario game once a year.
Right.
So it's not a good one.
Yeah.
I respect this. I think it's a smart move. We don't need more MMOs right now. And so, I mean, they do solid games, solid single player games.
I said MMO. It should be like games as a service. It's probably more accurate. Yeah.
But yeah, that
still.
We don't need any of those. Look at how many are shutting down right now, right?
Yeah, and it just goes back, we've had this conversation so many times about Sony's approach to the future with all these games as a service that I respect Naughty Dog for. I mean, I'm sure that's a hard decision to make after already investing as much time and energy and work hours as they have into it, but to respect their fans enough, like, we're not going to put out a substandard game.
Yeah, I mean, that there are business realities, but there's also keeping that brand. And right now, that Naughty Dog brand, even if you don't really like the Last of Us games, and I understand that for some people that's not their style of game, but like they've been putting out consistently good games now for years with the Uncharted games, with this. I mean, even going back obviously to, they're the team that created Crash Bandicoot. And, those games were good for their time. They haven't maybe aged super well, but like they were really kind of amazing games when they were originally released. Speaking of Sony, there is a rumor out today that a PlayStation 5 Pro is possibly being worked on for this coming September. So September 2024, a release then. This would be like the PlayStation 4 Pro. This would be a more powerful version of this system. The rumor was that it would have more advanced ray tracing capabilities. It would have Sony's own source solution to DLSS, which is the technology on computers that allows games to maybe be put out at a 720 resolution, but sort of upgrade it to a 4K resolution from that, so that you could, have more detailed games put out at a higher resolution, essentially. There's, this is coming from Jeff Grubb on the Game Mess podcast that he does on weekdays. Jeff Grubb has a pretty good track record of getting stuff like this right. He also has a track record of sometimes getting it wrong, but he says this has come from multiple sources, and he's checked it with his own sources, and there seems to at least be something here. Now, this could always be at the last minute, this gets scrapped and they don't actually release a new system, but at least it seems like this is something they are working on at the moment.
Yeah, I don't think it's surprising that they would try and put out something. Even if September 2024 ends up being not accurate, I feel like just the assumption that a PS5 Pro is going to come out at some point makes sense.
Did you buy one of the upgraded consoles, either the Xbox or the PlayStation, last time?
I had a PS4 Pro. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a PS4 Pro.
Okay.
I never had the PS4 before that. That was the only one I had.
So that's when you decided to jump in.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was the first PlayStation I had, was the PS4 Pro.
Yeah, I mean, I just wonder for how many people, actually spend the money to like buy an upgraded console. How many people is this like really a sales point for them?
I haven't. Well, so I guess the Switch, I kind of got a new one, but
Yeah,
I mean,
you
it
got
wasn't
the
like
OLED.
yeah.
I did get an OLED. I was at the pawn shop in town a while back, and they had a great deal. So I was like, okay, well, sure, why not? But no, typically I would not. Sorry to interrupt you, OJ.
Oh no, you're fine. But yeah, with no other system have I bought an updated one.
Yeah, I haven't done it. Other than I think I did get an upgraded DS, not the 3DS, but an upgraded DS when they came out with the bigger screen models. And that's just, but to me, that's a little bit different. It's not more power. It's like a bigger screen. And so like the same with the OLED kind of feels a little bit different than to me.
Also significantly cheaper to upgrade that one, I would imagine, than whatever the PS5 Pro is going to go at.
Right. I mean, but this may be a way, right? Like, so they take the regular PlayStation 5, they drop the price on it. Maybe they drop it down to $400 or $350 to compete more with Xbox.
Yeah.
And then they have a model up at $500. I mean, I still think $400 is still a little too expensive to get into that market that we're talking about, down around $150, $250 or so.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how PlayStation and Sony responds, if they respond to the stuff that Xbox has done with their price cuts, or if they're just like, people are buying our consoles.
Right.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you cut the price if you have to cut the price.
Yeah.
If the other side is getting a big advantage. But if they're still outselling them at $100, $150 more, Why would you?
Yeah, sure.
That's been Nintendo's philosophy, right? People still buy our games at $60. We don't ever have to cut the price.
Dragon Warrior on the SNES, $60 still.
Let's see. A24 has been announced as the partner with Kojima for his Death Stranding film. They're already selling T-shirts. Say Death Stranding and A24 on it.
Okay, I was like, I feel like you have. They've been Death Stranding T-shirts already exist. What does this one say? Death Stranding the film on it?
Yeah, basically, yeah. I mean, that's what they're selling. I mean, A24 is a respected film producer, so
Absolutely.
I feel like they're not going the Uwe Boll route with this. They seem like they're going to try to make a good quality Hollywood film.
The question is Norman Reedus going to be in this? I feel like he has to, right?
It's going to be Chris Pratt.
It's going to be Chris Pratt, like playing Norman Reedus. He's going to grow his hair out.
I'm Norman Reedus.
Hi, I'm Norman Reedus.
And that's in the credits. It says Norman. Chris Pratt as Norman Reedus as Death Stranding guy, whatever his name is.
Yeah, I mean, this like, okay, good. Like, if you're going to make these movies, like, take them seriously. Don't make them like little cheap cash-ins that video game movies have been at times. But, taking it seriously, putting money into it is not always a guarantee. The original Super Mario Brothers movie, they put a lot of money into that. We know how that turned out. Prince of Persia, they put a lot of money into that. Yeah. They thought that was going to be a franchise. That did not turn out. They put a lot of money into that Assassin's Creed movie.
Yeah, there've been a lot. I mean, the Uncharted movie had Spider-Man and Mark Wahlberg, and it was the name Tom Holland.
Tom Holland.
You're looking at me like,
kids, it did not literally have Spider-Man. What an interesting film.
That movie would have been probably more successful if Spider-Man was in it.
Gosh, Mr. Sully, you want me to steal ancient artifacts? Mr. Stark never asked me to do this.
But yeah, I mean, those actors aren't coming cheap, right?
Right.
Those are sought after actors, and so
those were serious attempts.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll be interested to see what this ends up looking like, and if they try and partner it or pair it up with whenever the second game is supposed to come out.
Yeah. I think there was so much success with The Last of Us with that that remake and alongside the series and everything. Obviously, I think this remaster of Last of Us 2 is meant to coincide with the second season of the show. So you do sort of think like, okay, this starts to make sense. We're making this movie. We're making a sequel to Death Stranding. We're going to try to co-market these as much as humanly possible. Who knows? We may get a remaster. We've already gotten a director's cut of that game, so I don't know if we'll get a third edition.
That's where you're getting into Kingdom Hearts territory. Death Stranding director's cut 1.5 remaster.
365 over 87.
Drop distance.
The prequel.
I mean, that starts to be like a Capcom game at that point. Alpha. We'll just stick that on there at the end. Let's see. Netflix has announced their plans for their 2024 game lineup. Hey, guys, you remember Netflix makes games? Everybody remember that?
No.
Netflix seems to remember. No one else does. So they announced like some of their plans coming for the new year. They plan to have something like 80 games by the end of this year, 2023. So going into next year, they mentioned Sonic Mania Plus, which they kind of talked about in terms of like an exclusive. They must mean on mobile platforms. Obviously, this game is already out. You can go buy Sonic Mania Plus. It is the best Sonic game in like 30 years. So that's good, I suppose.
I'll wait until after. I have a question, but I'll wait until after we get through the list of the
Is it about Sonic?
No, it's not about Sonic.
Okay, because you should hold that for Alicia when she gets back.
She would be upset if Sonic's name were uttered.
Because I'm just going to make up an answer. and she will be mad. She will like immediately start texting. Let's see. The Braid Anniversary Edition. That's that remaster remake of Braid. Chicken Run Egg Extraction. So this is a new Chicken Run game based on the new Chicken Run film, I guess, that Netflix is making.
Okay.
I do wonder if this is going to be like that clicker egg game. What's the title of that?
Egg Inc.
Yeah, Egg Inc. Mm-hmm. I wonder if this is going to be a knockoff of that, because that's immediately what I think when you title a mobile game Egg something. Hades, Harmonium, the musical. That's the one that we talked about last week. And they did announce that at the Game Awards. That, you know, there was a prominent Netflix logo on that to begin with. Money Heist, Ultimate Choice, which is based on the Netflix series. Netflix Stories, Virgin River, which also based on a Netflix show. I think it's weird that I don't know what this Netflix Stories branding is for some games. It's like Netflix Stories, Virgin River. Are these going to be smaller, sort of one-off games based on popular films and TV shows of theirs?
So I'm kind of thinking like the Walking Dead games where they're like story-based probably, and you have to choose. That's what I think when I see that.
Okay, yeah, I could see that. That would make sense. They also announced a Rebel Moon game that would be set between the two movies. Rebel Moon is the Zack Snyder big sci-fi extravaganza that's coming out. The first part is coming out at Christmas. It is his script for a Star Wars movie that Star Wars said, no, we don't want to make this. So he's like, fine, I'll go to Netflix and they'll make it. There are literally lightsabers in the trailer for that movie.
All
right. Zack Snyder is like, it's an adult Star Wars film. Like, I want people to like say fuck in it. And, like, Zack Snyder.
They're just going to call them fuck sabers then instead of lightsabers.
We're getting into a much different film.
I didn't think about that comment before I said it.
Oh man! If Alicia were here, she would say, "That's the title for this show." No, Alicia, we can't title it that. We'll get banned from services.
Oh man!
So the next one's a Squid Game game.
So a game based on Squid Game, which they had, they're obviously working on season 2 of that. They just had the reality show based on that.
Like people from the reality show are suing them, like some of the contestants.
I haven't heard about that.
So during the one with the big creepy doll, the like stop go thing, and it was outside and it was in freezing temperatures. And then people were like sitting there laying on the floor, and the other people couldn't move because they would be kicked out and help them. And then people were on the ground and they had to wait for someone to come and pull them off. And people got frostbite.
Oh wow!
And apparently they haven't paid the winner yet either. They haven't given the winner their money. So like it's like, oh well, at least nobody will probably get hurt on this one. We'll see, I guess.
I've really got to ask though, like, did anyone at Netflix watch Squid Game?
I know that's. I mean, I assume where you're going is like that's the lesson that's supposed to be learned from this show.
I mean, I feel like Squid Game is like, I don't know. It's the people who watch Starship Troopers and are like, man, that's a badass movie, Starship Troopers. Like, that's me. I'm going to join the Marines and be just like those guys. And you're like, it's an anti-war movie. It's satire. That's one of my favorite commentaries ever because it's just Paul Verhoeven on the commentary track going, no, fascists are bad. Like, no. Like, you're not supposed to root for Neil Patrick Harris. He's the bad guy.
Or people who watch the Joker or like the Joker and Harley Quinn and say, "Oh, our relationship is just like them." What?
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna call someone. Like, I'm going to report you.
Like, the whole point is he's an abusive partner. Yeah. Did you not get that?
Like Stockholm syndrome. Yeah.
So the question I have, and I don't know if either of you can answer this. How do these games work? Like, how do you play them?
So, you log in with your Netflix subscription, but they're their own games. So, like, you can play Monkey Island, or not Monkey Island, the Bloons with the monkeys in it.
Bloons?
Yeah, Bloons. You can play one of those, and you can either buy it for $7 or you can log in with your Netflix and play it. So I think it'll be the same with some of these, like Sonic Mania Plus. I'll probably
on what? Like
on my
on your
phone.
computer, on your phone.
Phones.
Okay.
Yeah. These are all for phone games. For
Okay.
now.
Yeah.
That's why I was like, what? I don't understand what's happening with these games.
Yeah, I mean, like they had it for a while. I don't know if it still works this way, but like the Netflix mobile app, like if you pulled that up, there was like there'd be different categories of films, and as you went down, there was just like a category for games, and if you clicked on one, it would like install the game onto your phone, and then you could, then like you would log in with your credentials from Netflix to play it.
Okay.
But yeah, it's like Netflix trying to like build out greater value for their subscription service by including games into that. I mean, we've talked about it a lot on here. Like, is there value in that? Like, is anybody subscribing to Netflix or keeping their subscription to Netflix for these games?
No, but it's a perk.
I'm sure some people are like intrigued by it. You know, I could see people seeing Hades if that's a game that they had heard of, but again, they're part of that first. Like, oh, well, I have Netflix. You know, maybe I'll give that a try. Like, I could see that being a possibility.
I think it's a perk to Netflix, but I wouldn't get Netflix for it. But like, I played.
I'm sorry. No, please.
No, I was gonna say because I love the Bloons game, but I wasn't gonna pay $7 for phone version of it, but I would pay it for, or like Netflix is like, oh, free, so I'll do it. And there's a game like Moonlighter, I think is what it was called too.
Right.
That sounds right. Yeah.
The only reason I played it is because there was a Netflix version of it.
Yeah, I mean, so like it's definitely a perk, but I would rather just like have Netflix let me keep using my mom and stepdad's account. That would be a better perk. I would appreciate you more, Netflix, if you did that than give me Hades.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you got to think whatever extra money they're making off of that, they're pouring a lot of that money into these games.
Sure.
Right.
So. Yeah, I can't imagine Hades is like a cheap to get.
Right.
In terms of whether they have the rights to it, to hosting it or something like that. If that's how that works.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. But like I think the thing that surprises me the most about this story is that Netflix is sticking with this. So they must see this as either having been successful or they're still confident it will be successful for them at some point. They have stuck with this longer than Google's stuck with Stadia. And I think that's actually saying a lot because, Google abandoned that thing pretty quick and Netflix seems to, be reinvesting more into this. So
I remember there was a service for games like Netflix. It was GameFly or something.
Right.
Was that owned by Netflix or was it a separate company?
I don't think
company.
so.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I didn't know maybe they just put like some of their energy that way, but
I could understand.
Yeah, if it's a whole different company, then I don't know.
Well, speaking of Google, Google released their most searched for games of 2023. So these are what people have searched for on Google through the search engine. These are the most popular games. And I thought I included this because I thought it was kind of interesting, sort of what we've been talking about this episode, that sort of divide between hardcore video game fans and the more general public. And that sometimes people who are talking on podcast about video games and producing content about video games online aren't super in touch with the general public and the sort of games, even the general public who are playing games, right? They don't necessarily have that connection. So number one on this list might surprise some people, except for this is also still the best-selling game of this year. And that's Hogwarts Legacy. So, not only is it the most searched for game, it's the most bought game this year. So, you know, it's a game that got no nominations at the Game of the Year, the Game Awards. It hasn't been in a whole lot of discussions at, you know, for different websites and things here at the end of the year. But obviously the general public has been super exciting. You mentioned, you know, somebody in the program being super excited for it as well.
Yeah, and that's where it's like, I think, for those hardcore people into gaming, it might sound surprising, but then, when you think about the general public for about half a second, it's like, oh no, that makes complete sense as to why a Harry Potter game, or at least in the Harry Potter universe, would be the most popular game or the most sought after game. Because I feel like, you know, when the game was first coming out, and, you know, there were a lot of, you know, conversations just about sort of Rowling's involvement and, you know, all of her stuff. I think there are a lot of people, and Justin, I feel like it was you who had said this. There are a lot of people who are not like online enough to know all of the things that she has, you know, said. That, like, if you were to tell them, oh yeah, this is the reason why I don't really engage with Harry Potter anymore, they're like, oh really? She said those things? And, you know, and so I'm not surprised that this is number one and why it's, you know, so successful. And I hope those people have enjoyed it. I know a couple of friends who have played it. They enjoyed it for the most part.
Yeah. I think that's, you know, I have a friend who desperately wants to play that game still, but just hasn't had an opportunity yet. Number 2 was The Last of Us. I'm assuming spurred on by the television series. Number 3, so here's one of those kind of big surprises, was Connections.
Congratulations, OJ.
Thank you. That was all me.
You have spread the good word.
Yeah, I have.
The Mormons are coming to recruit you now. They need somebody with your skill set.
Well, see, remember, I stopped going to Congregate and they closed down. I started talking about Connections. They're the number 3 Googled game. So,
trendsetter.
Yeah.
Number 4 is Battlegrounds Mobile India. And Mario, you were asking me, is that a like India specific version? And I'm guessing yes, just by the naming there. Number 5 is Starfield. So I would love to see a search chart to see how much that search fell off like after the release of the game. Number 6 is Baldur's Gate 3. That's not too shocking.
Which is probably the inverse of Starfield.
Right. It's probably one
absolute nothing, and then it just skyrockets.
At its release, it just is when they start talking about you could have sex with a bear in that game.
True.
Yeah.
That's when that skyrocketed, I bet. Number 7 is an Asian game, which I cannot read the title of.
It's Suika game. It's the watermelon game.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
It's the one, I don't know if you've seen it or not, where you've got like fruits and you combine fruits to make bigger fruits.
Okay.
It's like that 2048 game where you combine number, but it's fruit.
But it's fruits.
Okay.
It was very popular among like big streamers. And so it had its moment for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it blew up on TikTok.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that at the time, but I still don't think I've ever seen that game.
It's like 99 cents on the Nintendo eShop. Like I just had enough of like the bonus coins from buying games to just like get it for free essentially. And it's a cute little game.
Okay. Number 8 was Diablo IV. Again, a game that I feel like had a huge amount of hype in the early part of the year, and that probably fell off a lot after its release. Less so, it's not a game that I feel like disappointed people as much as Starfield. I just think the hype fell off quite a bit on that.
And I have had to Google a lot of stuff about Diablo 4 since I started playing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that plays into it.
It is one of those like very online games
where
people are going to want to look up like best builds and that sort of thing. Number 9 was Atomic Heart, a game that I feel like has mostly kind of fallen off the radar. That was kind of early in the year, in the spring. And number 10 is Sons of the Forest. So that's one of those online survival games, survival/horror games.
Okay.
Sequel to The Forest. Again, a game that I feel like was getting talked about more in the first half of the year and has kind of fallen off and everything. So I just think that's kind of interesting because, again, like what are people actually playing? We talk about a lot of times on here things like Roblox, which is the biggest game in the world, and we never talk about it. And there's things like Sons of the Forest that are huge, or this watermelon game.
Yeah, I can't. Honestly, I mean, the most surprising omission, in my opinion, is Tears of the Kingdom not being on here. I mean, I know people have obviously known about it, but I'm still surprised that it's not in the top 10.
Yeah.
Let's see. Mortal Kombat 1 is getting cross-play support coming in February, but there is no mention of the Switch version.
Again, just another argument. It's a console exclusive. It's a unique experience.
Yeah. So I know, I mean, I'm sure there's multiple reasons, but everyone else would have to wait for it to load, because it takes a bunch of time for it to load, and other people on other platforms will be like, wait, did it freeze? What's going wrong?
Did I get booted?
Yeah.
My connection?
Wait, they're just standing there for 30 seconds. What's going on?
Why did her head just like fly off her body?
Wait, why did that fatality just like freeze my game?
Why am I taking damage? They're not moving.
Yeah.
Just like such a weird situation.
Yeah.
And they have generally been pretty good about this. Like, I mean, the last time I remember Mortal Kombat taking this much egg on the face might have been like the Game Boy version of Mortal Kombat, which was just like a complete train wreck.
Yeah.
And pretty much unplayable. So there you go. We talked a little bit earlier about games getting delisted and pulled and everything in regards to the day before. Ubisoft has also delisted a game. This is the original Crew game. The Crew has been delisted, and servers will go offline in April of 2024. The Crew is not an exclusively online game. Like, you can play that game entirely single player. So it's really kind of weird. I think this also has to do with some licensing issues. But usually when there's a licensing issue, they will announce ahead of time and tell people, hey, this game, we're going to delist it. If you want to buy this, like Microsoft did this with some of the past Forza games, like announcing, hey, we're going to have to delist this because we're losing the rights to these particular cars, and it's not worthwhile for us to re-up this. So if you want to buy this game, buy it now, and you'll get to keep playing it. But it seems kind of weird in this case that Ubisoft was just like, all right, we're going to do this under the cover of darkness. Nobody asked. Yeah. I mean, shutting down online servers, games do that all the time.
Sure.
So that's a little less shocking. And we've already had the Crew 2 and whatever the Crew Motor Fest or something.
I know we talked about one earlier this year.
Yeah.
I don't know if it already came out, though.
It did.
Oh, okay.
That was their Forza Horizon sort of clone.
Okay.
I think it's the Crew Motor Fest is the title. Something like that. So, this is 3 games back. So, I guess.
Sure. Yeah.
That does it for news. So let's move on to our big question. Our big question this week, since we are headed into the holidays, is what's your best ideal for gaming coal for someone? So if you had to fill somebody's stocking with gaming coal, what game would you use? Or maybe it doesn't have to be a game. Maybe it's a system. Maybe it's a peripheral.
Well, we just talked about it, so I'm going to say Mortal Kombat 1 on the Switch. I mean, it's a small little thing. It'll fit in the stocking, too. I mean, it's fine. I would buy someone a Switch and give that to them just to be like, but I would make it so the Switch can't go online or play other games.
You have said that you can be petty.
Yeah.
Buy somebody a Switch and Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm going to get a package from OJ. Like, this is how OJ finally reveals his true feelings.
If you ever get Mortal Kombat 1 or OJ ever suggests Mortal Kombat 1 on the Switch to you, that is a sign, unfortunately, as to
he hates you.
You might want to reconsider some life choices if you get to that point. But also, if we're not talking the Switch, I would definitely offer a Final Fantasy fan Stranger of Paradise.
It'd be what kind of Christmas then?
Chaotic Christmas.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Good answer, Mario.
I've talked about this game before, never really in all that much depth. It's Monster Truck Madness on the Nintendo 64. I said it's like the most miserable gaming experience of my entire life.
That's pretty impressive.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's just like picture a racing game in which the cars, you cannot control the cars. They're very slippery. Some of the levels are just pitch black. There is a track you're supposed to follow. You can't see it though. Yeah, it's not an enjoyable experience. At least for me. There might be some real Monster Truck Madness heads out there, but I hope you are living your life well. We don't ever need to meet though.
All right. Well, my answer got spurred on. I was watching Jeff Gersman, who used to work for GameSpot and Giant Bomb, has been doing streams where he's trying to rank every NES game ever released. And so I've been checking out a little bit of those and everything because there's always those NES games. There's over 700 NES games, so there's always that game you're like, what? And I don't even think I ever heard of that, let alone played it or saw it being played. But he did play on a recent stream Back to the Future.
Oh.
And I was unfortunate enough as a kid to get Back to the Future for the NES because I really liked Back to the Future, the movies. And I thought, oh boy, a Back to the Future video game, that's going to be fun. Those movies have very video game-like elements. Like there's skateboarding in those and like all sorts of fun stuff. And that game is terrible. Like it's really broken in a horrible way. It's just punishingly mean to you as the player.
What kind of game is it?
So it has a few different game styles in it. But like the main one that you're doing is like you start off the game and you're in the past in 1955 and you have to like get to the cafe, the like soda shop and everything in the town. And you are running down the streets and there's like potholes and bees and like 50s hooligans that are attacking you, and they're just constantly attacking you, and you have a timer that's counting down this entire time, and you get through the level, and then you have to play another level that looks basically exactly the same. The layout's a little bit different.
Is it like an auto scroller?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's like a vertical auto scroller.
So it's like Paperboy. Sort of.
Yeah,
Okay.
sort of like, it kind of looks like Paperboy.
Okay.
But like you're not doing anything fun like throwing newspapers. And like Paperboy's a good game. So like
not
actually,
to knock Paperboy.
like actually it kind of makes me mad that you compare Paperboy to this because Paperboy I actually really like. That's a good game.
It's like an evil dimension version of Paperboy.
Yeah, this is like
Paperboy with a goatee on it.
But like it just plays terribly, and then like when you have to play through like 3 or 4 levels of that garbage, and then when you finally get to the soda shop, you basically are playing root beer tapper.
Okay.
And you're like having to throw sodas at Biff and his gang to keep them away from getting up to the counter.
Which makes sense because if you present somebody with a root beer, they have to drink it before they can do anything else, right?
Yeah.
Right.
They can't just ignore the root beer.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you're just throwing them at them. They're not actually drinking them.
Okay.
No, it's not as good as Root Beer Tapper. Root Beer Tapper or Tapper, the original version that had Budweiser in it. Good games.
So what I'm hearing is this could have been like the best game of all time. You're combining Paperboy.
It couldn't have.
Tapper.
It never had a chance to be. It apparently never had a chance. This is this is a cursed game. This is the game of the damned. And it kind of blows your mind because you're like, you have a really cool property. Like you could have made some generic Mario knockoff and had Marty, like You could have made Adventure Island. Master Higgins rides a skateboard in that game. You could have just made that, and it would have been a better, reskin that game, and it's a better game than this. And so as a little kid, I don't remember if I got that for Christmas or my birthday. Like, games were expensive. I didn't get them many other times than those events. But I do remember getting that game, taking it home and playing, and just being so sad. And then that became the game that you lent out to friends. Like when your friends wanted to trade games, they're like, it
was the white elephant gift that just like constantly got regifted.
Well, I never like traded it that way, but like, you'd have a friend who is like, they wanted something new to play, and you're like, all right, well, why don't I take Blaster Master for 2 weeks, and you take this steaming pile of shit. What? No, I said this great game. Take it. So that may or may not have happened, and I apologize.
That was the first iteration of Justin's great deal.
It was a great deal for Justin. I didn't say my great deals were always for other people.
Yeah.
I am like Satan in that way.
See, when you said the name, I had a reaction, and I didn't remember playing it, but I know that I played it and hated it, and it was horrible. And I was just like, oh yeah.
I mean, it's one of those games, like, once you play it, you're just like, it's a bad game without the property attached.
Yeah.
But with the property attached, you're like, you had Back to the Future, and this is what you came up with?
It hurts your feelings.
Yeah. Like, it's one of those things, like, it kind of hurts you, like, you had this property, and this is the best that you could do.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the opposite of the Super Mario Brothers movie. They had a great game property, made a horrible movie. So,
but I would say the Super Mario Brothers movie is a better movie than this is a game.
that's a lot.
And I'm not one of these delusional people. I'm not Ryan who thinks that they secretly like the Super Mario Brothers movie.
There are decent things about that movie. There are enjoyable aspects about it. Toad is good in that movie. The transformation of the Goombas, great scene.
I mean, I think it's a great movie in that it's insane that somebody got to make that movie.
Sure.
Like I've said this to Alicia. I'd rather a movie be like insane than boring.
Yeah.
Like be insanely bad than boring, because at least insanely bad is interesting to go back and look at. This is not interesting unless you just want to see like how to make a terrible video game.
That's what I was going to ask is this the type of game that like you would go back to? Like it obviously wasn't good then, but like what would be like playing in 2023, but it sounds like it's not even that. Like there's no redeeming quality to it.
No, it's not this is so bad it's kind of fun, or it's kind of so weird that you're just intrigued. Like I would say a game that lots of people got really excited by back in the NES days was The Adventures of Bayou Billy, because it was a game that had like multiple different gameplay styles in it, and it's not a very good game, but like it is interesting to go back and see like here is a game trying to do what a lot of modern games do today, where there's multiple gameplay styles in it. Like, I mean, any of your sort of open world games generally have, kind of some of these elements. And so like, that's an interesting game just to go back and look at. And I think a lot of old NES games and those 8 and 16-bit generations are like that. But this is just like, it's interesting to look at as is a bad game. And like, when people say NES games were bad, this is what they're talking about. Like everybody talks about your Super Mario Brothers and your Mega Mans. They forget how many games were like Back to the Future. And it's a lot, unfortunately.
That's how, having played as many of the N64 games as I have, like when people were upset by like the initial announcement of what was going to be on the virtual console, they're like, we're like, well, what that's it? Only these games? And we're like, well, what do you want? Like all the racing games that are forgettable and all the other like 7 out of 10s that like there's like 20 good games out of the 200 that are on there. But yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things that for every console, right? Like there's a large library, but we only talk about a small percentage of them. So that's really interesting that he's going and playing through all of them, and that this one that stuck out for you. That's really funny.
I mean, I would say like the N64 is especially a great example of that. Like people forget the N64 had a lot of terrible games. It was mostly terrible games. And like people forget because Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time are 2 of the best games ever made. But once you step pretty, too far away from those games, like once you get past your Mario Karts and your Star Foxes, most of that console's library is pretty much trash.
Yeah.
And it's often trash compared to like the PlayStation version, right? Like there's better versions of those games on other systems. Like Resident Evil 2 is a technical marvel on the N64, but that's a terrible game. Like who would play that version?
Yeah.
I mean, now, like at the time you played it because that's the system that you owned.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I still love the N64, but it's one of those things that it's like, no, when you actually go through and sit and like really look at every single game on here, and there's certainly still some hidden gems as well, but there's some rose-tinted glasses when we look at some of these old consoles for sure.
Yeah. All right, that does it for us this week. Thank you, Mario and OJ, for joining me. Obviously, as we said at the top of the show, we are going to be off for about the next month or so. When we come back, we'll do our game of the year for 2023. We need this month to relax from finals and then also like catch up on all the stuff that we haven't had time here at the end of the semester to play. So we'll have all of that when we get back. For everyone listening, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, awesome Kwanzaa, Happy Holidays in general for whatever you celebrate. Thanks for listening to us for this year, and we'll see you in 2023.